But perhaps this pause serves as a purpose. Perhaps it allows you to integrate what you've already lived before rushing into what's next. Perhaps life is giving you time to catch up to your own transformation and be better prepared for what is coming. Welcome to Intuition Unlocked. This podcast is for women who are craving a deeper return to who they are. Maybe you've lost your spark a little, or feel unsure of your next step, or find yourself searching outside of you for clarity. Well, this space is here to bring you back inward and ignite your heart and soul once more. I'm your host, Olivia Ashley, a mother and intuitive, and I'm so happy you're here. Hello, friend. Welcome in. I have a question for you today. Have you ever looked back at your life and realized that there are certain periods that seem to belong to entirely different versions of you? And not just from different circumstances, but different yous. Maybe there was a version of you before motherhood, or before a major loss or a healing journey, before a move or a spiritual awakening, or even before you learned to trust your intuition. When you look back, it can almost feel as though your life is divided into chapters, each one carrying its own lessons, challenges, relationships, dreams, and even the way of seeing the world. Lately, I've been fascinated by this idea that life may move in cycles far more than we've been taught to recognize. Because everywhere I look, I see cycles. There are cycles in nature and in our bodies. There are cycles of the moon and the sun. There are cycles in the seasons and in traditions. And perhaps what I find most interesting is the cycles in us. So today I want to explore three things. Why human beings seem to move through distinct seasons of growth and transformation, what often happens when a cycle is ending and a new one is beginning, and how we can learn to work with these transitions rather than feeling confused or discouraged by them. Because while understanding cycles won't necessarily change what you're experiencing, it might completely change how you relate to it. So let's dive in. One of the things that first pulled me into this topic was noticing how often the number 7 appears throughout both human history and in our day-to-day living. There are 7 days in a week, 7 visible colors in a rainbow, 7 musical notes on a scale, 7 primary chakras in the yogic traditions. There are the 7-year developmental stages in Waldorf education. There are 7 heavens in various spiritual traditions. Even the moon moves through major phases in roughly 7-day intervals. Now, I don't share that because I think there's some magical answer hidden inside the number 7, though there definitely seems to be something there. What really fascinates me is that across cultures and across centuries and even belief systems, humans repeatedly observe that life unfolds through rhythms and stages. And the difference between them and now is that our ancestors paid attention to this. They watched the changing seasons, the migration of animals, the cycles of planting and harvesting. They noticed when the moon shifted between waxing and waning and full and new. They noticed and revered the stages of childhood, adulthood, elderhood, and death. They understood something that modern life often encourages us to forget, that life is not linear. Life is cyclical. Everything in nature and on this earth seems to move through periods of growth, expansion, harvest, release, rest, and renewal. Nothing blooms forever. Nothing remains unchanged. And yet, somehow, even with all these examples around us, we have been taught to expect that from ourselves. That we're supposed to know who we are and know it always. That we're supposed to know what we're doing, what our 5-year plan is, and to stay consistent, productive, and certain. But the more I observe life, the more I wonder if certainty is actually the exception rather than the rule. Maybe transformation and change is the rule. Maybe cycles are the rule. And as I reflected deeper on this topic, I kept returning to this one question. Why? Why do we not simply arrive at some final version of ourselves and stay there? Why do we have all these seasons? Why all this change? And why all the letting go and beginning again and everything in between? And while I can't fully answer that, and I'm not sure if I ever will be able to, and that's okay, what I have come to believe is that these cycles are all about expanding our perspective. And that seems to be very important for us as we develop and shift through our lifetime. So think about who you were 10 years ago. Maybe you had many of the same qualities that you possess today, but maybe you don't. Either way, I guarantee you see life differently now than you did then. Your body is different. Your beliefs are probably different. How you see the world is different. Your position at work is different or in your home. When you reflect back to that person you were 10 years ago, you can start to remember that you understand things differently. You can start to remember who you were within yourself, that you understood things differently or noticed things differently and value things differently. By moving through cycles, through change and transformation, life has given you perspectives that simply weren't available before. And not because you were missing anything or you were behind the curve. I think this happens because wisdom often comes through lived experience, and you can't get that without living. When I reflect back to who I was 10 years ago, it's almost hard to compute. I can feel her, I can sense her, and I can place myself in that state where I was newly out of college, navigating my first entry-level full-time job in Boulder, and I was living with my parents still. And literally almost 10 years ago to the date, I was about to give birth to my firstborn, and I was so scared about what my life was going to look like and how me and my now husband, but at the time, my boyfriend, were going to make this work, make our relationship work, make life work. I had such low self-esteem and low self-worth. I was at a rock bottom leading up and into my pregnancy, and I had really no sense of my own knowing or trust in myself. And I dare to say I was just learning what spirituality was, what that felt like, what it meant in my body and my soul. So wow, when I reflect back to her, I realize how much I have grown and changed and altered and become a really beautiful, strong, confident woman and mother of 4 now, which is incredible. My life is so different, and I wouldn't be who I am now without those cycles and those lessons and those experiences and choices that came before me. So when you do this reflection within yourself, you can start to see that within these cycles, time, seasons, and experiences offer you some truths that just cannot be taught in any other way. They must be lived. And each cycle seems to offer you a different vantage point from which to view yourself, your relationships, your purpose, and the world around you. So perhaps the purpose of cycles is not self-improvement. Perhaps it's just expanded awareness and understanding. And then you have a choice to do what you want with that. Life continually is going to invite you to see more and to understand more and to become more conscious or aware or learn those lessons, move past those hardships, but you don't always have to choose it, right? It takes time, and some of us never choose those things. We allow and accept where we are, and that's okay. It's each of our own journeys to walk and experience. And no matter how you walk your life and your experiences, all of us meet endings at some point. And I've realized that endings rarely arrive dramatically or in a way that you're like, oh yeah, fresh start, clean page, we're done with that, let's put it aside. Or at least you don't notice that at first. Most of the times I think endings begin as a feeling. There's this subtle friction, or there's this little awareness that something isn't fitting the way it once did, that the goals that used to excite you suddenly feel flat, or the routines that once supported you feel restrictive or mundane, or the conversations you've had for years just no longer energize you. You feel kind of stuck and like, what else do I talk about? You can even find yourself questioning things that once felt certain, like, oh my gosh, we made this plan and we walked this path and that felt really good at this time, and yet now it feels confusing. Now I feel like it doesn't fit us anymore. All those are little signs that something is shifting. Not to be fixed necessarily. I think we all have this tendency to solve, to fix, to jump in. And there's a lesson there for us. There's a lesson if we can notice it and how we relate to it. But we can start to notice that I don't need to fix this, but I need to become aware of what's happening within my body and around me so I can start to let go of what I'm clinging to still, and that's causing that friction, and start to open up into this new possibility, because that's what it is. It's a new possibility that you are being shown you're capable and ready for. And with that, while you'll notice that something's shifting, I've also found that many endings actually begin long before anything changes in your physical world. And that's where things can start to feel tricky as well, because you're feeling a certain way and confused, and yet your physical world has not caught up to what you're stepping into or moving through. So sometimes that change begins in your relationship to things. You haven't left the job yet, but your relationship to the job has changed. Maybe you haven't moved houses yet, but your relationship to where you live has changed. Maybe you haven't altered a friendship, but your relationship to that friendship has changed. Do you see what I mean? You can sense something's not quite right, but nothing's changed in the outer world yet. And I think we all have a hard time noticing these or accepting these because it brings so much discomfort and confusion and this want to stay safe, want to stay in your certainty. And we don't often talk about these states of transition. We usually internalize them as something's wrong, something's bad, something negative is happening. What am I missing? I'm lost. I'm confused. I'm freaking out, right? All those things that we can jump to. So we can interpret these feelings as confusion or failure and wonder what's wrong with us and why can't we just be happy and why can't we stick with the plan? But perhaps nothing is wrong, and that's what I need you to hear. Perhaps life is doing exactly what life has always done. Cycling, shifting, inviting, expanding. And that's the invitation. Because those last years of a cycle often feel less like an arrival and more like preparation. So you think you're falling apart, but in hindsight, once you've moved through it, you realize that you were just being rearranged. That yes, certain doors closed, but others began to open. That pieces of your life started moving around you like furniture in a room, being prepared for something new. The challenge is that you usually don't understand what's happening while you're inside of it. You only understand later. So it's like standing 1 inch from a painting and trying to grasp the entire picture, but you simply can't because you're too close to it. And I think that's where many people find themselves right now. There's this collective feeling I've noticed in many of my conversations with clients, with friends, with listeners on this podcast, and even within myself. It's that many of us feel like we're standing in a pause right now. That change has happened or is happening, and yet you don't fully understand what it's all leading toward. The old chapter has loosened its grip, but the next chapter hasn't fully revealed itself. And I'm completely honest that this space can be incredibly uncomfortable. Of course you want answers and direction and certainty, but perhaps this pause serves as a purpose. Perhaps it allows you to integrate what you've already lived before rushing into what's next. Perhaps life is giving you time to catch up to your own transformation and be better prepared for what is coming. The more I've reflected on cycles, the more I've realized that every season offers something valuable, even the ones you would never choose, especially the ones you would never choose. But growth teaches you, and also stagnation teaches you, joy teaches you, and so does heartbreak. Your vibrant health can teach you, but also illness does too. Love will teach you, and so does loss. The seasons we all often label as difficult, I see as being not interruptions to life, but being life, period. Just life. Some of the most important lessons I've learned come from periods I desperately wanted to end. And yet looking back, I can see how much those experiences softened me and humbled me and connected me to myself more deeply. So my invitation was not to suffer more, but to remain open to what it may be teaching me. The experiences and the cycles we move through allow us to remember that beauty exists alongside challenge. It's remembering that gratitude can coexist with grief, because the transition between cycles asks you to let part of what came before die off and decay, to surrender into the shedding and letting go so you can be birthed anew for this next part. And when you make sense of that and allow it to happen, you may also find that there's this energy there that is pulsing and pushing you. It's that phoenix rising, because what is decayed has given you the sustenance to go forward. And perhaps one of the most powerful practices you can cultivate is remembering to look for what is being offered, even when life isn't unfolding according to your preferences. Another thing I find fascinating when looking into cycles is that many ancient cultures didn't treat transitions as inconveniences. They treated them as sacred. They created ceremonies around them, rituals, initiations, periods of reflection, even pilgrimages and gatherings. They were marked as moments where a person's crossing from one stage of life into another was witnessed and honored. But today, many of us experience profound transformations in complete isolation. We become mothers. We heal these big old wounds. We experience these beautiful awakenings, and we reinvent ourselves. But often no one pauses to acknowledge the enormity of what is occurring. But perhaps we can start to reclaim some of that wisdom. Perhaps we can create our own rituals or moments of reflection, ceremony, or time in nature, and bring these big transitions into conversations with our trusted friends. We can find ways of honoring what is ending and welcoming what is arriving. Not because we know exactly where we're headed, but because we trust the process enough to participate consciously, and we offer recognition and gratitude of just how big these transitions in cycles are. My last observation is around intuition. I've noticed that intuition often becomes clearest during these big transitions, not because it just suddenly appears, but because it starts to come forward, because we've entered into a space where our old map has stopped working. And when life is predictable, we will rely heavily on our habits and on our usual modes, which is logic, patterns, past experience. But then when we start standing at the edge of something new, those tools can only take us so far. So eventually we reach this point where our mind doesn't have all the answers. And that's often where your intuition begins speaking more clearly. There is such an invitation with your intuition throughout every cycle, because as I reflect back to that 10 years ago, I knew I was intuitive, but I didn't have language for it, and I was not cultivating it or listening to it. I was in fight or flight, in my mind, overwhelmed. But what I've come to learn is that intuition is your superpower. Being able to sense, being able to notice and perceive and feel offers you a compass. So while you don't have that map fully always, you have a compass with you always to receive, to ask questions and gain clarity, to perceive. That's what your intuition is doing. It's taking all of this data, all of this information into your body, and then also noticing what's already within you and offering you a picture, a feeling, a word, a moment to help you through whatever it is you're moving through. And that's what I find incredibly beautiful, is when we can honor ourselves, honor our senses, honor our intuition, you automatically start to trust yourself, and you start to trust in something beyond these limited understandings and this external view of the world. And you always have that anchor within to come back to say, okay, no matter this cycle, no matter the discomfort, no matter the goodness in my life, I am supported. I know I have somewhere I can turn to and that I can trust to carry me through, make sense of all this, and help me find beauty and promise and those breadcrumbs that are laid out ahead of you. That's how your intuition can help you through your cycles. So there's a challenge to start learning to listen in these moments, to listen for the next small step. Notice the next breadcrumb or invitation. Because remember, your intuition will not hand you that entire map, but it will illuminate enough of the path for you to keep moving forward. So as we close today, I want to leave you with this thought. What if the goal isn't to figure out your entire next chapter? What if the invitation is simply to recognize the season and the cycle you are standing in? Remember that winter doesn't need to understand spring's full plan. The seed doesn't need to know exactly how the flower will unfold. The moon never rushes toward fullness. Life always moves in these cycles and in their own time, in this beautiful, sacred time. And so do you. Perhaps your wisdom isn't found in predicting what comes next. Perhaps it's found in learning to inhabit who you are and where you are. So trust the season. Notice what it's teaching you. Try to find beauty in the growth and in the waiting, in the laughter and the grief and the healing and discomfort and everything in between. And maybe the greatest gift of all is realizing that even in the seasons where nothing seems clear, Life is still moving. There are roots that are growing beneath the surface. There is life that is unfolding around you, and maybe you cannot see it yet, but you will. So thank you so much for spending time with me today. Until next time, keep listening inward, trusting yourself, and remember, every cycle and every season has something to offer you if you're willing to receive it. Thank you so much for being here today. I am truly grateful you chose to spend this time with me and be a part of this community. If this episode resonated, I'd love for you to leave a rating and written review because it helps Intuition Unlocked reach more women who are ready to live clearer, bolder, and more self-led. As a thank you, screenshot your review and email it to me, and I'll send you a resource to support your next step. And until next time, root into your truth, rise into your power, and radiate your light.